What's up? It's Matt. We are back with a Friday edition. We're going to end the week with a great session talking about operations in your restaurant with Mr. Sean Finter. We'll be back in a second. Sean, back from Greece, back to America. Tell everybody who you are and what you're all about.
All right. Hey, Matt. Great to be with you. Yeah, I am back. I just got back from a three-country tour. We did Italy, Greece, and Romania, and back to work. And work these days, I sold my company Barmetrics after over 2 decades since I founded that. And now I'm just focused on my passion, which is coaching bar and restaurant operators with our new company, Bar Launch.
Yep. So tell us about Bar Launch. What are your main focuses there? Is there a certain avatar you're looking at? Is it the guy with a startup bar? Is it somebody with 5 of them? And what are some of the expertises you're helping them with?
Yeah. So our sweet spot is the business owner that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bars and restaurants that's looking to sort of stabilize, claw some of their time back, and at the same time multiply their profitability. There's a lot of money left on the table with a lot of bars and restaurants. And in some cases, we have clients that want to scale. So there's a lot of work to do in order to get the platform right to do that. So we do a range of things, but particularly focus in culture side of business, the processes during peak hours of operation, straight through to marketing aspects and so forth. Really business fundamentals for bars and restaurants.
Okay. And the scaling part to me is always interesting because I run into it probably every 6 months or a year, but I had a guy recently that was telling me how he was going to open 3 more stores. And in the same conversation about how he's losing money in the one and it's hard to operate and it's terrible to find people. And I'm thinking, I've got 2 vans that we bought that we invested about $700,000 into a division of our company to build the media empire. And I'm not going to go buy 5 more vans until those 2 are completely, things are streamlined and I can actually scale. You run into a lot of people who the word scale is sexy and they think it'd be cool to have 5 bars versus 1, but shit, they can't run 1.
Yeah, well, exactly. I find myself talking to a lot of people out of a lot of things. That's part of coaching, and I think that, humans in general, a lot of us are wired to have more. And the question is more what? More revenue. That's not very sexy. More profits, cool. In order to do that, sometimes you have to have a lot less time. You're giving up time with your family and so forth. So it's a matter of finding that balance. And a lot of the work that I do goes back to my own experience when I wanted more without really a plan. And my board said to me when I had 2 restaurants in Australia, they said, well, if you want to triple your organization, do you want triple the locations, triple the revenue, or triple the profit? And I said, well, profit would be nice. And they said, well, how would you do that here with the existing stores? And we came close to tripling our profit at the 2 stores. And then we scaled, right? That's a good time to scale once you figure out the formula for success that works for you and your family.
Yeah, I remember when we grew our boat and RV dealership, it was me, my dad, and my brother over 9 years. And we grew it from 0 to 15 million in annual sales. And we were amazing at sales and marketing. We sucked at everything else. And I remember looking at the numbers towards the end, and the economy closed it in 08 when, the shit hit the fan there. But we weren't structured correctly. We weren't equipped for, a disaster of that sort. And there was no PPP loans back then.
Right.
But what cracked me up when I looked at it was I remember looking at our numbers and saying, Dad, we made more money, more profit at $4 million in sales annually than we did 15 million.
Yeah.
And it's because we scaled with other people's money on borrowed money. And it was a lot of inefficiencies.
Yeah. Well, and that's it for so many people. And that's why a lot of people want to scale, is that they do well with a small business and a tighter geography, and think that that's just going to replicate. You'll have the same sort of success and the same sort of frame of hours. Even if you get more management, those are still more people to manage when you're owning the business. So, I think having a good plan together, and one of the things that I do for our clients is ask the questions that my advisors asked me back then. And sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up before you can grow.
I love it. So let's dig into a topic that I think you're more than well equipped to answer. And there's some things in here that I can chime in on, but when we were talking about what to talk about today, talking about operations, and I run across a lot of businesses that are hardcore adamant. We got to have this many new customers. We got to find this many, get this many more of our customers back. And there's a lot of times when I'm in the restaurant, and full disclosure, I'm not a restaurant person. I'm a marketing and sales person.
Right.
But when I see 400 people come and go from a restaurant on a Friday night and I see 20 of them eat a dessert, I'm like, well, maybe instead of more people, we just sell more stuff to the people who are already here. But I'm going to guess there's also a lot of things with regards to efficiencies and with regards to operations that can not only grow that revenue, but make that revenue more profitable, right?
Yeah, well, that's it. And so I think it's a great place to start. People in business, and especially bars and restaurants, that cash and particularly oxygen or profit is oxygen, right? So a lot of folks are starving. And what typically happens is that most bars and restaurants, and I've had the opportunity to work now with over 7,000 around the world. And it's the same in the US as it is in Japan, as it is in Australia, or it is in France. Most bars and restaurants typically have 12 to 20 hours a week of peak hours. Like, that's it. You're doing all this to have a dozen up to 20 hours of peak. If you have a lot more than that, you're in that 1% class. But for most of them, that's the game. So what happens is when those hours get full and busy, they turn their back on them and they start looking at, how do I market lunch? How do I get Wednesday night going? And so again, back to my advisors, they said to me, are you really fully milking those cows? Like, are you getting everything you can out of those peak hours? And what more could you do? This is where so many businesses can double profits. I'll just give you a few examples. Well, there's a few areas to wrap your head around. One is, I'm standing in one of my bars now. No cash register. It's not that kind of bar. It's just in our corporate office. But if it did have cash registers, the things that we'd look at here was, first off, like the ergonomics of the bar, right? So without getting too technical on a Friday afternoon, the average bartender in the US in a sort of pub style business is putting around $600 worth of cash through the register every hour during peak hours, right? Yeah. $600 an hour, $10 a minute, 16 cents a second. So if the bar is set up in a way that I have to go a few feet over here to get this and come back, and that's 10-second interruption, that's $1.60 every time I have to move out of this zone that I'm supposed to be working in. So we look at the ergonomics of a bar. We look at the product range, not just the bottles behind you, but your cocktail list, your food menu, and so forth, and say, have we got that streamlined down to a point where we're delivering at a level of excellence? We have enough variety, but not too much that it overwhelms the business. And then thirdly, we look at the people involved in the process. How are you getting supported during the shift and so forth? Here's what I can tell you is that if you take a bar that's doing $600 per hour, as an example, you move them up 20%, right? That's only an extra $120 per hour per bartender. That typically doubles the profit in an organization because of that $120, about 70% of that is net profit, right? We go from earning 15% net to 70 on that money. So that's one or formula to a pretty quick way to getting that done.
So one story that you brought to mind with me was a restaurant that friends of ours out west, Catherine, her husband and his brother owned a restaurant. And she was also an emergency room technician, surgeon. And she would come and work in the kitchen. And she would come and work one day a week in different departments. And he was telling me, he's like, it was wild to see the changes that Catherine made in the kitchen. Because you're in the ER,
right?
There's not tools everywhere. It's very systematic. And so she came in and she would watch and she'd say, why are the buns here? Why is the cheese there? Why is the skillet there? And he said, it was wild. She made our kitchen flow so quick and smooth. And it takes me back to a place I visited last week. I went with one of our vans on the road to shoot some of our shows. And we went to a restaurant that has 3 locations. And the third one we got to, really cool, kind of like the saloon type look down in London, Kentucky. Awesome place. But they bought a space and took it over and made it their own. The one thing they didn't change was the bar. And I'm not shitting you. There was 10 feet behind this bar. Right. And I was like, man, what is there something back there? Is there a trap door? And he's like, nah, it's just the prior owner. We don't know why they had it this way. But I'm in my mind, as you're saying that, like the bottles were like, a 20-yard sprint back to get a bottle of vodka and come back. So I can imagine that right there, they might not realize how much money they're leaving on the table by not just moving that bar back 4 feet.
Yeah. Well, you raised 2 really good points there. Firstly, The first bar that I bought looked like the inside of a swimming pool. You know, it was a terrible design. One of the reasons why I think it failed with the previous owners. But when I looked at the structure of the building, we didn't have enough room for a back bar display. So we drilled a hole in the wall. We realized there's got to be more space back there. There was another 4.5 feet. They wanted it symmetrical, the designer. So they lost the back bar. So now bartenders are running down here to get product and over there to get, it's crazy.
4 feet.
And secondly, to your point about the ER person, you know, in making these changes in the bar, like I tell you, you go into a kitchen and these are much more, there's always room for improvement, but they're highly efficient, right? There's bright lights. There's people there trying to limit their movements to get food out quicker. You take your kitchen people and get them to help you out on the bar to get that process right. And for your viewers, I can give you for free, I'll give you a step-by-step process to doing this that involve the kitchen team, involve the bar team, and you'll be able to implement these efficiencies really quickly. No cost.
How can they get it?
I'll give it to you. I'll give it to you at the end of this, and you can put it up in the link.
Is it now, by any chance, is it on the website, businessofbars.com?
It should be.
Okay.
Well, that's a different website.
Okay.
But there's a lot of info there. But if my email we could put up too, it's just Sean@barlaunch.com, and my team will get them a whole step-by-step video set and so forth.
So it's Sean@barlaunch.com.
Yep.
And that's wild to think that 20%, what that can equal profit-wise.
It's incredible. You know, you think if everything you do, if you have a $2 million store and you're making 15% net profits, you're making $300,000 a year. If you load another 20% on top of that, and now you have $400,000, but now you're earning 70% on that money, you see how quickly this works. And again, I'd rather, you know, engineer my peak hours at 12 to 20 hours for that sort of optimal output than focus on a bingo night. You do the bingo night after you get those hours right. And the way we look at it is like every season, you know, we change menus, we change products and so forth. You've got to keep looking and tweaking your bar. You know, bartenders themselves are creatures of habit. They like things where they left them yesterday, but moving things back inside that area that a bartender is working in, making the changes around them can add up to huge dollars at the end of the month.
And you're dead on the focus of other day parts, because I hear that a lot. Our marketing company, one of the reasons people reach out to us is they want to increase their revenue. And when they, you know, they feel like they've already got the other stuff, hey, how can we find new customers and get our current customers to come back more often and get lost customers to come back, you know, again? And one of the things they all commonly bring up is, hey, this day of the week on lunch, this evening, night, and they're always focused on those. And I remember telling one restaurant, we were talking about it, that where he was located, there's no parking. It's parking garage, and it's paid parking garage, and he's near a downtown Pittsburgh. And, you know, for somebody to leave their office and go there to have lunch, it's a little task. But then to park in a parking garage, walk across the street, go to the damn I mean, there was all these hurdles. And I'm like, why don't we figure out, and this is before I even think about what you said, I'm like, why don't we figure out a way to ignore that? It's not happening. There's too many hurdles. We'll worry about it later, but why don't we figure out a way to pack every night when they're not coming from work, when they don't mind parking, when they have a little more time. And that's where you talk about those peak hours. Yeah, that's exactly it. And getting the peak hours right. I get the question all the time. My business is struggling. We just don't have enough cash. We don't pay ourselves properly. We're even short paying our suppliers. So I always say, hey, if you can't make your business work in that 12 to 20 hours a week, you really got to question if you have a business, right? Like there's something really going wrong that if you can't make it work there. Now, once you get it working there and you start to build out the business, another process that we work with clients on, and to your point about looking about the parking and getting to the front door and the host stand, we help clients think through methodically, and we have a process for this to say, you know, what's the desired outcome for your guest at that point? You know, you get to a parking lot, maybe there's only so much you could do. But if one of the things that people are looking for is ease of use in and out, how could you change that? Or safety, how could you bring more light in the parking lot? You get to the host stand and people want to feel welcome. They want to feel that their place in line is secure. They want to feel that you wanted them there in the first place, that they feel important that they're there. So we work through and say, now, how would we get them to that conclusion, right? How would we get that conscious mind to believe that I'm welcome, I'm important to this business, and there's a wait because they're good. And I'm going to be comfortable that my place in line is secure.
on to the next touch point and the next touch point. So that's the engineering with the guest experience that we do.
And one thing you brought up there, which I had mentioned earlier in an offline about technology, is one thing that I jokingly said a few years back, and it was the truth, is that most restaurants were 20 years behind technology. And, before the pandemic came, they're like, oh shit, there's this thing called the internet. People can order food on it. People can get in wait lines. People can get texting from us. And, some of the conversations I had when the pandemic hit, teaching custom restaurants how to gain people's data and then, text them to let them know that their food's ready and they can take it. I mean, just basic stuff to me that we've been doing for 10 years. That you brought up a good point there, is that now that we're kind of past that and people have embraced some certain technologies, is the technology of the simple stuff. That I went to a restaurant the other day, and it was a decent restaurant, a little higher end. And the lady scribbled down our name and our number of people. Okay, I'll call you when your table's ready. You can go walk around the street if you want, because they're shopping. Like, I don't know, something just didn't vibe that the lady was actually going to call us. And so we sat down, and I watched people come in, and they'd come in like, hey, we put our name on the list 2 hours ago. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I should have called you. I didn't. We don't have a table yet. And I watched her, and I'm thinking the whole time, she literally just had a simple $20 a month product.
Right.
Put the person's name in, click a button, table comes up, click a button, text them, call them. There's a lot of things like that to me as a consumer, because I eat out a lot, is that it makes me more comfortable with the experience than when some lady randomly scribbles something down and it doesn't even know what the hell it says.
Yeah. Well, it's a great point. And add to that, Matt, as you know, that, getting that number, and now you're building a database as well, right? So you're building your business as you go. And like you say, these days, that's a $20 a month sort of fix for the business. Yeah. I think a lot of people, almost brag about being old school about how they run businesses. And that's fine, so long as it doesn't inconvenience your guests. Yep. Right. And a lot of people are afraid of technology. That's why you got to bring in people that can help you with it. Because I believe that, that fear that technology is going to replace us, I don't think it ever will. We're in the hospitality industry. It's just going to enhance the way we can deliver service to people. I'd much rather be at a table with my kids and hit on my phone a button that says, hey, we didn't get ketchup. We asked for it. And rather than me waving my hand, looking around, the waiter coming over, asking what I want, going back, just hit a button to say I need ketchup. And suddenly a runner runs it out, and I'm back to my experience with my kids, right? That's how it should be. And that integration is what I think a lot of people are striving for right now.
How do you feel about table ordering? I've been to restaurants where they say, hey, order on the tablet and I'll bring your food. I was at one the other night that said, hey, here's how you order. I'll stand here and talk you through the menu, but you place your order that way. Everything comes out exactly how you want it. And then that person was able to wait on more tables because she wasn't holding hands. What do you think about tying in technology like that? Is that going to create efficiencies and get rid of waste and issues in the kitchen?
Yeah, I think it will. And, in a perfect world, I'd rather, as a guest, not have that, assuming that the server has the time and experience to make this a seamless experience for me. Yeah. Given the option of a subpar server experience and some technology backing that up, I'd rather use the technology, right? So, and what you just mentioned, that hybrid, I think that does a couple of things. A, it allows the server to kind of shine and add color to the framework. And then B, it makes sure that, things get in right. And then C, you're training the guests to be comfortable with this, right? And know that they could put up their hand at any time and Sarah's going to come back to the table. So I think there is a place for it, and it's where the world's going, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, and this one had little updates on it too, with regards to where the food was at when it was ready. And it took me back to an article. There's a guy named Alex Hermosi, has a book called $100 Million Offers. Amazing read, by the way, if you haven't read it, anybody out there in the internet world watching or listening. But one part in the book he talks about is that sometimes in marketing, it's you're either trying to shorten time and make an experience better or quicker, and people will pay more money, or you're trying to make the illusion of it. And he was talking about one of the subways somewhere, and I think it was in Europe, that instead they couldn't make the subway go faster. They couldn't fix all this stuff, but they put up screens to show people where it was at, where you're at, how long till you get there. And that took the customer experience to the roof because people knew what was happening versus going, where the hell are we at? What stop are we? How much longer do we have? And I kind of thought when I saw this in that restaurant, because I had read the book twice before, and I'm like, oh, this kind of makes me feel like the guy in the subway that knows where my stop is and how far I am.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned Alex. I think he's one of the brightest young minds in business today. He's actually part of my business group, and he helped me out with my business, and I helped his brother out with his restaurant in Baltimore. His brother's got a pretty cool career. Yeah.
That's a small world. Yeah,
so
we used his company for I have a gym I was involved with for 9 years.
okay.
And
Yeah,
we
for the
used
gym
Gym
launch.
Launch for the
Yeah.
gym 5 years ago. And it's kind of kicked me in the butt because I had a conversation with Alex like about a month ago, him and his wife and a couple of his advisors. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I knew your business model with my gym, but I never related some of the stuff because we're identical with restaurants, what you did with gyms, except you took yours at about 100 times quicker than I did because he was more efficient with what he was doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think I love the way he thinks. The two things that I see him do better than most people in business is, one, he really identifies the problem to its fullest extent before he goes after the solution. And secondly, he's looking at, like, how do I 10x the result? Like, most people are just looking to get it done or get going. He's looking at the whole field and saying, how would this be absolutely world-class and advance it forward? And, again, he's a guy who works on business fundamentals as well and gets tremendous results for his clients.
So what are some other things within the restaurant operation, within efficiencies of those, 12 to 20 peak hours? What are a couple easy things that restaurants are always overlooking and bars?
Yeah. So if we, to focus on the physical side of things, I think firstly, just getting back from Europe yet last night, spending time in Italy, you go to Italian restaurants there and bars, and the menu and the drinks list is typically half of what you get here in the States, right? I think you wind up with a big, heavy, clumsy menu when you don't invest time in teaching your staff how to sell what you have, right? So you wind up getting out of a place where you can deliver at a level of excellence during peak hours to having this range so everybody's happy, and at the end of the day, nobody's happy.
Yeah.
So I think firstly, and really streamlining down to a point where you can deliver. I'll use a cocktail list, for example. When I went to Tails, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago is when I first met the guys at Said Moses and the team out of LA. They were 213 group. Now they're Pouring with Heart. Yep. And they won best cocktail list in the US. And I thought what they gave me to look at was an insert. It's like a page like this, half a page, and it had 8 drinks on it. So I thought it was like their seasonal menu inside this Great American Cocktail List. Well, it turns out that was the whole thing. That was their list. And it was a place called Varnish, tiny little beautiful cocktail bar. So a couple months later, I was there, and I go into Varnish, and they gave me the list, and I'm there with a friend, and I count the drinks, and now it's got 7 on it. And I'm like, that doesn't make any. I said, why do you only have 7 drinks on your list? He goes, the bartender said, you know what, we wanted to have 8, but when we did the work and tested it over a couple of weeks, we realized there was only 7 drinks that the whole team could deliver at a level of excellence during peak hours. So we'll make anything you want. You tell us what you want, and we'll make it or try to make it. But we can promise you these 7 drinks will be next level. We can guarantee them. Yeah. So, so that's first off, is like, keep it simple, but do it at the next level.
Restaurants, so many of them screw that up. I mean, I was at a restaurant the other day. They had to have 100 items, and they had steaks. They had Mexican. They had steaks. They had seafood. They had fried chicken. They had wings. I'm like, there's no way you've got a chef back there that can cook awesome steak, Mexican, seafood, chicken wings, fried chicken. I mean, it was comical.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing. And as I say, the reason I love going to Europe at least once a year is that contrast to where we've come from and where they still are to some degree. I went into one restaurant in Italy. They had 3 appetizers on the menu. One was an octopus. The other was a small salad. And the third was a bowl of red sauce and a bag of bread. And I'm like, really? So I get that. I can tell you my entire time in Italy, and I love food, that was the best meal or the best item that I had the whole time. I've never had sauce as good. The bread was unbelievable. Yeah. And I said, what is it about this sauce? Like, they said, you know what? You can go and talk to the chef and you won't find out the secret. You got to go and talk to the farmer. He said, these are perfect tomatoes, right? He said, everyone thinks it's the chef. And he goes, he's putting together 3 or 4 ingredients. One of them's salt and one of them's tomatoes, right? He said, there's not a lot in there. So it's start with something amazing and keep it amazing. Yep. So I think that's one place to start, Matt. The other is that kind of technical, geeky place. But let me give you an easy example when it comes to the ergonomics of a bar.
Okay.
If you took the example with the chef from the kitchen, and he or she is sitting on a high top outside the bar during peak hours for a minimum of 2 hours, ideally 3, right? And you're paying them to do this. They're watching the bar. They take a piece of paper and a pen. I'll give you a checklist if you want. That's all done for this. Easy to do.
Okay.
And then what you do, if I'm a bartender, I'm here in this cockpit, right? The ideal cockpit is like between 7.5 and 9 feet. So my wingspan is about 7 feet, right? So you put a piece of tape here, white tape here, no one notices it, and another piece of white tape there. You say to that person over there, whenever that bartender walks out of that cockpit, just write down either what they're doing or what they're getting. Right? At the end of the shift, you're going to have all these items, and they put, there's 15 beside here because you had a new ingredient way down here. Ford's gin we just added, and I'm grabbing that, and then I got to go put it back. And then this guy came, he was waiting for it. He goes, you know what I mean? You write it all in, and then you decide what can we push into this area, and therefore what goes out, right? You look at your depletions and say, what doesn't belong here? Each time you're picking up $1.60, right? Wow. Every time at 10 seconds, you're moving up.
Wow.
And then here's a third sort of simple tip. And again, I'll give you,
right? Reminds me of like a Toyota factory.
Yeah, it is. It's that model, right?
Six Sigma.
Six Sigma, just cranking it up 1 degree at a time. The third idea here is that most bars and restaurants cut to the bone when it comes to labor, right? They're trying to run a minimal system.
Yeah.
And it's really flawed thinking. If you only have 12 to 20 hours a week to make your money. So on this bar here, if I was on my own, and it's this tiny one-man bar I'm standing in, the bar upstairs is a 3-man bar. But if I'm in a 1-man bar and I don't have a dedicated bar back, so someone's coming around, they see me once in a while, and I say, hey, I need this or I need that, or, looking at what you pay at bar back, whatever your business model is, and say, okay, for 4 hours on a Friday night, 4 hours on a Saturday, 8 hours in a week, you want to try a dedicated person here, because every bar at the moment has a revenue seal, right? If I work in this bar during those 3 peak hours, supply and demand, right? Whether I'm 3 deep or 33 deep, I'm full and I'm pushing out drinks. You look back 12 or 14 weeks on your sales, you punch out the outliers, the highest and the lowest, because you had a function one night or the weather prohibited people from coming another, and you're looking at take that, you look at the revenue seal and say, what can people actually push out here? Set the goal at 20%. And then you start to adjust to these things. On the example of the bar back, you take a bartender that was doing $600 per hour. Now she's doing $700 per hour at a $15 increase for the labor over here. 85 extra dollars into flow. 75% of that is flow through to the company, and it's just mathematics.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a diminishing return. You can't add 3 people on; it doesn't make sense. And that might only be half a person on here, right? So you're here 30 minutes every hour. You got to cycle through whatever it is. It's finding at that sweet spot and finding out how you can deliver.
Yeah. I just actually made a post today. It's kind of comical that you brought that up, because I made a post this morning. I'm hiring 4 new salespeople for our company. Right now we have 11 people that work in the sales capacity, and I've got 4 of them that if they were able to get some stuff off their plate, they could be, doing 3 to 4 times more revenue. And I looked at some of the stuff on their plate and I said, wow, the stuff that they're doing that is slowing them down is stuff that a new person could be going through 3-6 months of training as their co-pilot and helping them find these restaurants that need help and get the information and put stuff together. And so I literally sat down with my CFO today and said, hey, I got this out. Here's why I'm going to add these 4 people, because I'm usually reporting to him on what we're doing. I said, I'm going to add 4 people. I'm going to give each one of these people a co-pilot, so that they can probably now have 2.5 times more meetings all week, which in our world could be $3 to $4 million in revenue by adding 4 people that are at the same time now are going through, they're in the cockpit, they're going through a training. And so it's the same thing that how many times you've been at a bar and at a restaurant and you've watched a friend not get that 3rd or 4th drink or 2nd drink because they couldn't get it because the bar was so backed up.
Yeah. That's it. And, when you look at that, what I started doing back when I was a bar owner in Australia, I started working with my team. I did a course, came to the States and did this course with a guy in LA. And he talked about energy at work, right? And he said that you're given this whole list of tasks to do. And there are things that give you energy. There are things that take your energy away. Yep. And there are things that, you don't mind doing. You just plod along through. And sometimes we crave those mindless tasks. So I asked my team, what in each position to fill out this form on all these things that you do in a night, Well, it won't surprise you with the bartenders that they hated cleaning when we closed the bar at 3 o'clock in the morning. And it typically took about 90 minutes to reload and clean and everything else. So I think I was the first bar, at least in Sydney, that said, okay, we're going to, at 3 o'clock, by 3:30, I want all my bartenders out. I'm going to bring people in. They're going to reload. They're going to clean the bar and everything else. I put people in that were grateful to have the work. And I actually hired a cleaning company that was happy to do that. My original one wasn't. They didn't want to mess behind the bar. So I made some changes. And I tell you, that change alone, two major things happened. One, the bartenders were just so much happier and energetic and fired out. And secondly, I had top bartenders around town that said, hey, I work another job, or I have kids, and I want to be in bed by 4 o'clock, not cleaning a bar at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
So, engineering your business that way, looking at it from your sake, how do you get more revenue, more profit, more energy in the company? And it works for them too.
We did something similar with my dad, kind of a little similar, a little different, but we had our boat dealership. My dad was it was me, my dad, and my brother. Me and my dad ran the company, and my dad was mainly sales. He was the Michael Jordan of sales. I would promise you, Sean, if you talk to him for 20 minutes, he could probably sell you some type of bar training. And you'd be like, well, shit, that's what I do. And, what we noticed with my dad, though, was he was not good at paperwork. I mean, 9 out of 10 things he sold, the people came to pick their boat up. Like, hey, where's the custom cover? Oh, it's just down the paperwork. Dad, I get a cover? Hell, I don't know. It was a month ago. And so I'll never forget, because I fought him for a month on getting better at paperwork. And we had more and more arguments over it. Well, then one day I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm hiring her. I went and hired this lady named Michelle Whitley. I said, Michelle, you're going to be a secretary. Whenever somebody walks in that office, employee or customer, you walk in and take notes. And if it's a customer that a deal sells, you make sure that every note that customer brought up that my dad committed to give them is on the damn bill of sale and on the form. And sure enough, a $35,000 employee ended up saving us about $100,000 in mistakes and about 50 angry customers. And then my dad he was happier. He's like, man, I love it. I don't have to do paperwork anymore.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, man, I feel like Benjamin Button. I'm going in reverse. Recently, I had 3 businesses. I went down to 2, but I had a lot of staff and I went down to very few because of COVID, right? Yep. I'm in experienced businesses and so forth. So it was right now is the first time in my career since I was 29 years old, which was a long time ago, that I don't have an assistant glued to me doing shit. That's why I'm pretty much useless. And that's why Ali was here helping me set up the computer for today. I don't know how to do a lot of stuff. And I was enjoying it, right? Like, it was like cool that I didn't have anyone around all the time. It was like a break for me, and I was learning new things until you need that shit done when it's supposed to get done. Right. And then I find myself in a bad mood. Like, why isn't this? I was trying to get the mute button off. Like, I don't know how to do anything. And I used to say to people, like, you're trying to save $50,000 a year. And like you say, it's costing you $150,000 a year, $1.5 million, because you're not doing the things that you're supposed to be doing. And, you're in your wheelhouse 2 hours a week rather than 22 hours a week. So I got to learn that lesson right now and fix it up.
I think we all go through it. And, guys like you, what I love about conversations like this is I have this podcast, then I have an in-person podcast that we shoot in the Deep Work studios here, which, by the way, have you ever read the book Deep Work?
I haven't yet. I'm going to. I love it. I love the logo.
Great book, amazing work on how to get yourself out of your phone and get deeper in what you do. But I had a guy named Lionel Thomas here 2 days ago. His episode will debut MPTV in a couple of weeks. And we were talking about, he's a banker. He's a local banker, CEO of a community bank, I think 4 locations. And I said, a lot of the part that really shined a light for me that restaurant owners should be kind of ashamed of was back when the pandemic, when all the stuff was hitting that first 6 to 8 months, the number of restaurant owners that were calling Matt Plapp, the marketing guy, for advice on PPP and IDLE. I was like, what? They're like, well, we've seen your webinars. All this stuff. I'm like, I'm a marketing guy. You should, don't you have an accountant? Don't you have a banker? Don't you? No. And it really, to me, I started evaluating a lot of people that I look up to as restaurant operators. And the one thing I found was that the ones that really shine a light that I see doing a lot of the right stuff have a guy like yourself consulting on operations of the restaurant. They have an accountant. They have a local banker. They have an attorney. They have a payroll company. They've surrounded themselves with what Lytle called like their local board of directors. And I think that was a big thing I noticed with the pandemic is that I had a restaurant the other day. It literally told me he never took advantage of PPP and just realized what the employee retention tax credits were.
Right.
And I'm like, man, like you probably left $500,000 on the table because you didn't surround yourself with educated professionals that can help you go to the next level. And that's how I view you, that if I'm a restaurant or bar owner and I've got an awesome knack for taking care of people and creating awesome items, the more I can get those in people's hands and mouths, the better. And what you're bringing up here with regards to efficiencies of, I love the thing. Every time somebody walks past that line, what the hell they go get? Because that's a huge element, because man, there might be 20 items that somebody's walking out and getting back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Well, hell, buy a second version of it and put it there and leave the other one out there.
Right. You're right, man. And I tell you, like, there's so many bar and restaurant openers that we, you can only help so many people a year, right? I've got a small business and we're pretty selective. And by selective, I mean, we want to take people on that we know we can really help. But I see a lot of people out there that are struggling. And the best advice I think I could offer them is there's three things that every bar and restaurant can afford.
Okay.
And they need to find a way to be able to do it. Number one is that if you own a small business that does over $500,000 a year and you are not in a free peer group, right? Like just have 8 people that do what you do.
Yep.
My peer group, I pay nobody to be a part of it. It's 6 other people. We meet once a month on Zoom and try, when there's not a pandemic, to get together quarterly in the same place for 2 days. And there's a formula, what's working, what's not working, what can you share with the group, where do you need help? And it's a game changer for me. Secondly, if your business does over $1.5 million, $2 million a year, and you do not have a board, that doesn't make any sense to me. Boards, for the most part, are free, right? You want to have experienced people, somebody in marketing, somebody in sales, somebody in legal that can help you make you think about things in the future, about negotiations that you have or contracts and so forth. Someone in operations, right? There are people in your city that want to help you. And I tell you what, like if you're a plumber, it's harder to put together a board. I don't mean anything against plumbers, but not the sexiest business in the world. Yep. If you own a restaurant, people are really interested in restaurants.
Easy.
They want to help.
Easy.
Yeah. Third one, and I said 3, but there's 4. The third one is a mentor, right? Having somebody who has been to the place you want to go and they're kind of on their way back and they want to share their wisdom with you. They want to invest it into you, right? What a beautiful thing to help a young person. I don't mean young by age, but young in business to
in that path.
Miss those landmines and hit those springboards. And then the fourth, and I've done this from year 2. So I'm a coach now, but not someone saying, do what I say and not as I do. I've always had a coach. And my philosophy on coaching was really simple. Number 1, do you really have expertise and experience in this area? Number 2, do you have the templates that are going to help me put this in place quickly? And number 3, can you guarantee me a return on investment? Right? So if a coach costs you $10,000 a year, I'd be saying, can I get 50 back in my bank account? If they cost you $50,000 a year, can I get $150,000 back in my bank account? And if that's the case, if coaches give you a return on investment, why wouldn't you have them? And then you have coaches, they offer you a money back guarantee.
My first coach in business was a guy named Billy Jean Shaw out of San Diego. And when I hired Billy, I spent the 1 year about $25,000 on him, 1 hour of a coaching session that he gave me advice on a webinar I was doing when I wrote my first book back in 2018, did $48,000 in 2 hours on a webinar.
Right.
And it was comical because I had these ideas and I went to him because he was the coach. I said, Billy, what would you do? How would you do this? He gave me the advice. I listened. That's a key element, because a lot of times entrepreneurs think they know better. Like, oh, but if you're going to ask somebody for their advice that you respect that's been there, take the damn advice. But I took the advice. And I'll never forget, because like the next morning he had heard from a friend how well it went. We had another friend in common that he coached, and it's like 8 a.m. my time. So it was like 5 a.m. his time. And he texts me. He's like, hey, bro, I heard you killed it. Great job. Thanks I'm proud of you for listening and taking that advice. I'm like, man, it's 5 o'clock. What are you doing up? And he's like, oh, I'm still playing Xbox from last night. And that coaching is huge. So I got the email up here. Is that the right one? Sean@barlaunch.com.
That's it.
Okay. So if you're out there and you're listening or watching and you want some advice, you want some of these tools that Sean mentioned, be sure to email him, Sean@barlaunch.com. And then I've got businessofbars.com is a great way to reach you as well. Sean, anything in closing?
I think that, well, firstly, just being on a plane and being around and seeing all these businesses opening is just so refreshing and heartening. But I know a lot of people are still struggling to find their feet and to get back at things. And you know, I think that's why people like you and I, Matt, are out there and are passionate about what we do, because, you know, helping these business owners, you know, not only to get back to where they were, but hopefully COVID gave people time, like it did for me, to think about, you know, what if I 3X things or 5X things, and that could be making more money or just getting more time back. I've got clients that are working 80 hours a week right now that want to work 20, and they said, "Do you really think it's possible?" And I said, "Yeah, lots of people work 20 a week. They just do different stuff than you do, and they have different processes and systems." So, you know, whatever your goals are, I think having those goals and then finding the right people to help you do that, that's what's always worked for me, and it's a proven formula.
Amazing. Well, I love it. Well, I appreciate you being the guest. Episode 113 in the books. Sean, go get some rest. I'm sure you got a little jet lag, and relax this weekend and enjoy that weather down there in Maryland.
I will, man. Let's connect soon. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thanks, Sean.
Take care, brother. Bye-bye.